Welcome to another episode of Contentstack Live with our host, Jeff Baher. We're excited to have Michelle Grady, our Senior Product Manager, joining us today to discuss how to optimize your composable stack for large-scale organizations and deployments. So let's dive in.
Hey, Michelle. Welcome back to Contentstack Live.
Hey, Jeff. Glad to be back.
So the title today, How to Optimize Your Composable Stack for Large Teams. This is actually part of a mini-series that we've been terming Power Productivity, where we hone in on some of the critical productivity capabilities really designed for digital experience practitioners. Previously, we were talking about live preview, talking about workflows, and today I was hoping we could just kind of switch gears and talk about content and a few different aspects of content, like the thing that we're putting into our platform. The first is really like, how do we best structure content within the system? And how do teams, especially as the teams get larger, how do they best interact with that? So maybe let's kind of break it down. First, let's just talk about how does content get structured inside the system, and what are the issues that kind of arise, as amount of content scales. Maybe just to start with that, like who's in the driver's seat with setting up the system and determining like the general content model?
Yeah, so that's really on the developers end of really thinking of how they want to architecture their content. They're thinking of how different avenues, omnichannels that they're going to be delivering it, how composable their content is going to be. Can they reuse it for different types of channels? And so really that's part of the whole architecture of how they want to structure. Developers are creating that when they first create their content models within Contentstack.
So I'm imagining that it's like a collaborative effort. Then it's in one part understanding what the business teams are looking to do, but then implementing in the system based on partly those goals. As you said, just the degree to which you want to reuse the content. When we talk about content set and number of entries, like how do you kind of measure like, oh, that's a lot of content, or well, that's a small amount of content? And what are some of the challenges that an organization is going to run into when it becomes a large amount of content?
Yeah, and just to your first point of this collaboration effort, it's definitely our developers and kind of content managers and editors really working together of one, how that structure is going to be for their delivering to the different audiences that they have, and just another of how this is going to appear as editors are managing all of that content. Kind of one of the biggest pieces here is just that, especially for our larger scale customers that have hundreds of thousands of pieces of content, it could be a lot to kind of manage. And it's like one big bucket of everything and anything that you've created.
Well, it's good to know. So we're talking hundreds or thousands, hundreds of thousands of content entries. If it's in one, so what's the common challenge? Is it really just, I can't find the content? It takes a long time just to kind of sift through it, or?
Yeah, there's different challenges there. One is, there's a lot of content to shift through to easily just get to every single time. Another, with content modeling and just inherently with headless CMS, there's kind of a structure around content types. They might not necessarily map to how editors perceive how their content is organized. I think for editors, they're really thinking of maybe different types of topics or categories, or even more closely on how their web properties, like a sitemap, for example, will look like, and not necessarily always a one-to-one mapping. And so for them, they have to kind of think of the architecture of the content sometimes, which sometimes difficult for them to kind of navigate based off of that.
So, and when you say, maybe we can use an example, but when you say content types, I'm thinking of maybe either a blog or a web page where there's H1 headers, H2 headers, there might be some metadata. The marketer might be that's a web page, that's the blog. But in terms of content types or content entries, might that not be a one-to-one? I think you kind of raised it.
Yeah, exactly. As we talked about a little bit earlier, just really the composable nature of headless CMS and just how developers are kind of thinking how to structure their content. Some of the content types might be a header or a footer, and then maybe kind of the body or the different elements within a page. And they may have one content type that has all of those content types together and being able to kind of reference that data. And again, this makes it a lot easy to reuse across different types of pages, but sometimes that's a little bit confusing for an editor. They're just really thinking of like that page level type of navigation.
So you could have content types within a content type.
Correct.
Okay. And there's always probably some translation between a marketer or a business user referring to it as like the blog or the web page, but that actually constituting or comprising 7 content types within that.
Yeah. You can reference a lot of different types of entries within that. We have what we call global fields. So that could span across multiple types of content types. So there's a lot of like the innate kind of architecture that sometimes confuses. And again, like it's not always easy to kind of have that one-to-one mapping of how they envision their content and navigating through it.
Yeah. And you can see just from this example alone, like you can very quickly like have this exploding number of content types, content entries. So maybe like shifting gears like a little bit about what we're doing to help kind of solve that. So what solutions exist? And you mentioned one with like global fields. Like, so what exists to help provide some level of organization and kind of like method to the madness? And then maybe what's new that we've got to further help with that?
Yeah, so right now our customers are navigating kind of through their content between either the content types that we mentioned, or we actually have labels. And this is kind of a grouping of content types, kind of try to help that hierarchical structure. But kind of what we're having right now and we're going to be releasing is a new feature called taxonomy. And so now this allows you to actually categorize your content. This spans across multiple content types. You don't necessarily have to know that all my content is in this area or not. You just kind of have to see it, kind of how you want to organize it. It can be kind of categorized, like I mentioned earlier. It could be more mimicking your sitemap, so kind of more of the hierarchical structure that most customers are used to kind of navigating like their web properties, for example. And so with taxonomies, you'll be able to categorize, organize large amount of content.
And you mentioned global fields. What else did you mention that went along with it before we had taxonomy?
Yeah, we had content types and then we have labels. And those are the 2 ways that you can navigate through your content today. And then we're going to have an additional way of being able to navigate and organize your content through taxonomies.
Are they complementary, or is it now with this, you won't necessarily need to do global fields, or like there's still benefit in doing that for other reasons?
There can be certain reasons to go and filter by a content type, but I think this will inherently make it more simpler to navigate, and it may not necessarily need to filter down.
Do as much of that. Yeah,
exactly.
Do you want to maybe bring something up and show? I know it's
excited.
Easy. Seeing is always easier.
I'm bringing you into what editors today normally see is a bunch of content. Right now, as I mentioned before, we have ways of segment content by your content type, which is the different articles. We also have labels that you can segment it on. But now with taxonomy, you can actually segment and categorize your content in a lot more readable format. So here I have a sitemap of being able to go through kind of your homepage, your different landing pages. I also have your different, like if you want to segment based off of region, for example, you can actually get all of your content for Europe a lot more easily. Before, you probably will have to do some certain search terms to get to that. There might be a few labels, but again, if it crossed across content types, probably have some several clicks. So this makes it a lot easier to just navigate and get to the content that you want a lot more easily.
So this now with the taxonomy, it's going to be primarily the primary view then for marketers, like content editors, content authors. They know, as you were saying, they could always kind of back out of this view and to see like the raw listing of entries or view by content type. But this is kind of what would be the preferred kind of view into the system.
Yeah, this is definitely as we talk to customers with the exact pain points that we were talking about earlier. This is kind of the view that they're a little bit more used to as well. Just a more like file-like hierarchical structure. And they mentioned that this will be kind of their main navigation of going through their content.
So typically they could have thousands of pages. So this then allows people within an organization to see just what they want to see. But that obviously is predicated on having a mechanism to then organize it.
Exactly. And one of the cool ways with taxonomies, previously we have a feature called tags. And one of the things that we've heard from our customers is that it's a bit freeform and they want a well-defined way to categorize their content. And so now they'll be able to create multiple taxonomies. As I mentioned here, we have like our sitemap. There'll be terms within that taxonomies. I've also mentioned, like, for example, different regions. You could have a hierarchical structure as well. And so you could easily group things, come back to it as your content grows. Your taxonomy will probably grow with it. And so this is an easy way to kind of manage all of those terminologies that you want to categorize your content with.
And then I think we're saying that you could have this be nested. So I could have localized site. There could be a specific sitemap for that. So I can kind of see the content kind of two ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I could kind of show you right here. I could create like a new region, for example, if we have more different regions and just logically grouping of larger items. You could actually easily just now group Australia and Asia in the new APAC region that you've created. So this is really flexible based off of your needs. You could have hierarchical structures and you could come back and manage these a lot more easily.
Okay, yeah, because sometimes theaters get redrawn or we go into new markets or different things that would require a significant amount of content to move or to be kind of like restructured, reassigned. This, yeah, I can see how this then greatly facilitates that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that demonstration is super helpful. I can definitely see how from a content editor perspective, like this saves a ton of time, makes people's lives a lot easier. What's going on, because we did tee up the developer kind of early on, is like, that's the person that's going to really set this stuff up. Were there some steps there that you'd like to show for how a developer is kind of setting up taxonomy or a taxonomy?
Definitely. And one of the things, again, with Headless CMS really is that developers kind of control how the content will be appear and be displayed and still having kind of that governance there. And I would like to share kind of how we were talking about, for example, the sitemap, making it kind of mimic your web properties, making it easier for the editors. And there is a way for developers to really control where these taxonomies get applied. So for example, in this homepage content type, and you'll see a new field in content type called taxonomies. You'll be able to add what taxonomies can actually be categorized for this content. So we're going to add that sitemap here. You could even have the flexibility of making this optional or required. So every single time an entry has been created, you're having your editors making sure that that's always categorized. And once you have it here, this is going to really appear for your editors now. So within your homepage, you'll see a new taxonomy field. They will see all of the terms that you've created. And it makes it really easy for them to know exactly what types of categorization will be for this piece of content. This will help them navigate back easily to their content here from the sitemap.
And again, this could be something that either was done at the outset when you're building out the overall model, or at any point then later on when you're like, hey, we're restructuring some things on our website. We need then this to be kind of mirrored within the system.
Yeah, it really gives the flexibility of when you're going to be introducing taxonomies. And especially as you grow and scale, there's different ways that you might reorganize your content. It might make sense 1 year from now to kind of reorganize it that way. And so we're definitely giving that flexibility. And one of the biggest things too is that developers really want to give their editors as much autonomy as they can. And so this still gives them the guardrails of creating content in the right structure, but giving them the flexibility of how they actually want to categorize them.
So let's kind of shift gears now, because obviously we're not yet at the point where this is all fully automated. So there's people clearly involved in this equation. So what's happening on the people side of things? Obviously, I mean, you kind of hinted at that this feature is aligned to the needs of what the teams behind this are doing, but what are some of the challenges, just I think before we even get to like the content part, just bringing onboarding a lot of people, structuring those people into teams and, privileges. And then I can see how these two would, obviously be paired together quite well.
Yeah, especially for larger organizations that have pretty complex permission structures, and just as they onboard more of their users, they have to manage that. And right now it's a little bit more manual. You have to provision or deprovision any permissions to a single user. And we actually are working on something new, which is our Teams feature. This allows you to essentially bulk add permissions to a user. This way, you could, for example, you have a set of editors working on a certain amount of content. They'll be able to always have those permissions within that team, and you could just easily move in users as a member of that team. It's just going to really help the management of the different types of sets of permissions that you have, and just easily give those provisions to all of your users.
How big do these teams get? Like, what do you kind of see? I know we service, small customers, large customers, very, very large enterprise, but how big can this get?
It could be hundreds of users daily. It could be across different stacks. They have different access to different types of content. As I mentioned, could be ways of different types of regions. For example, we currently have languages as permissions. We're looking to have taxonomies as well as another way to have permissions on what content can be accessed by whom.
Okay, so currently, if it's only French speaking, like we can align that team to that content that's in that appropriate language. But now, so now we layer on this that we can now map a certain team to a certain portion of like an overall site or to portions of that.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to show you how this would actually look like.
Yeah, let's do that.
So as you could see here, I have like our different teams for like APAC or EMEA. And now within your organization settings, there is a way for you to create a team. So I have one for EMEA and APAC already created, but maybe we have a team that's just North America, for example. Now you're able to, across all of your stacks, provision those editors with those permissions. So any user that gets added as a member of this team will just inherit all of these permissions, and all you have to do is add that member to the team. Previously, before, you would have to kind of individually give these permissions for every single stack, and this allows you to kind of put all your permissions together, maybe, like I mentioned, how they have access to different parts of the content, and then you could just easily remove and add users in that way.
So we do have some new people or newer people who are probably tuning in. So just for their benefit, what's a stack? Like, how do we define what a stack is?
Yeah, so for a stack, it means different things for different types of organization. There's some logical structure, especially if it's like shared content. It makes a logic, or for example, if there's a particular site, a stack is a way to organize all of your content together. You could have multiple sites. So for especially larger brands that have smaller brands underneath them, they might have a stack per brand. So it's just a logical grouping of how you want your content presented to both within your organization as you're creating that content, and then how you're actually delivering it to your different audiences.
Okay, so it could be all of a customer's.com would be a stack.
Yeah,
potentially.
that's possible. Yeah.
Okay, and then within that, typically they might have like a staging environment, a production. So those would be different environments within a stack.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, and then now to connect the dots. So with a customer that has multiple stacks, so we have a bunch of content now, which we can group into taxonomies, which can map to different stacks. We have teams, which similarly, then we can give privileges to different stacks or portions within a stack.
Yes, correct. So yeah, these permissions are created stack per stack basis. You're essentially creating permissions around who could access what content. And as I mentioned, taxonomy is one of the ways you could do this. Content types is another way. Languages is another way to have this type of governance. And then with teams, that just groups them all together for your entire organization.
Would you recommend for kind of any size customer, like let's set up a taxonomy, let's set up teams where it's like, yeah, if it's a few users, like it can probably make do? Or do you feel this will kind of span all kind of customer sizes in terms of benefits?
It really depends. I think it would definitely benefit kind of those enterprise customers with large amount of teams, large amount of content. I have had some talks with customers a little bit smaller. There may be a team of 5 where teams doesn't make sense, but as they know that they may grow and scale, that this is something that's top of mind and an option for them when they do. So it just depends how many users is too much to handle all at once. And then for taxonomy, I feel like it really ranges. Again, the greatest benefit is for kind of our enterprise customers. It makes it really easy to organize this group of content. But I have heard from other customers as well, a little bit smaller, where it just makes navigation a lot easier. They may not have all of the applications of taxonomy, but it'll make their navigation a lot easier to navigate through their content.
Do you see that there's a use case kind of related to security or privacy just within an organization, or it's that the team's so big, but like this is HR content and like we want them to control. We don't want certain people to even or have the keys to it, or maybe even just see it in a certain way.
Yes, most definitely. So how you structure your taxonomy, you have like an area for any like HR or any type of like only a certain group of users are able to even just publish that content. Taxonomy is a great way of using that. So one of the things is now you don't have to like create a different type of content type for each of that. If you have still a shared content model, you could actually segment it with taxonomies. And so you could have different parts of your organization as different types of taxonomy terms. You could create permissions with those different types of taxonomy terms. This is what we'll have in our general access. And then they will only have access to the content that they are given permission to.
Got it. And well, I mean, it's clear that both of these features are super valuable, especially for these large enterprises that we've been servicing. I know we usually get some questions kind of as we go through, and you're now a pro, having been on our program before. So I'm going to turn it over to Austin and just see what questions we have in addition. And of course, at any point, if you have other thoughts, feel free to just add those in as well. But Austin, do you have some questions for us?
Yeah, a couple. This one is, what actions do existing customers need to take to enable this new functionality today?
In early access, this is something that you need to reach out and we'll enable it for you within your organization. But as we have general access, this will be available for all of our customers. So once it's released, you'll see a new taxonomy settings and you're able to start creating taxonomies right after that.
You're estimating roughly what point do you think this will show up for customers?
For general access, this will be early 2024.
Okay. And then at that point, and we do our normal notifications out to customers, they simply just hit refresh, reload, and voila, right?
Exactly. Voila.
All right. Excellent. Austin, you have another question for Michelle.
Yeah, this one, they're wondering about what's on the horizon that you can share.
Yeah, we're definitely looking at AI applications with taxonomy. We definitely have some different types of use cases that can be populated with AI. So those one of the avenues that we're looking for, kind of future enhancements.
Excellent. I know obviously AI is a hot topic and one that we'll be revisiting a number of times next year. So as part of that, we'd love to have you back on to share some more updates on that.
Thank you.
Hey, so we had another question. Will these features be available within the Developer Fast Track?
Yeah, it is going to be available in the Developer Fast Track. So both Teams and Taxonomy, you'll be able to take a look at how you're actually going to organize your architecture and your content.
We actually had Eric Broadwater on earlier, one of our earlier episodes. I'm losing track which one it was, but I'm talking about the Developer Fast Track because it's really a trial experience for people who aren't yet customers. One of the things that Eric had mentioned is that we really are striving to have that experience be kind of the full experience, so giving the prospect or the new customer all of the features and really be able to experience our platform at scale. These features, especially these ones, really seem to be hitting the mark when things get really large. They may not in the trial load up all the teams, load up all the content entries, but they start to then get a sense for how the taxonomy feature, the team's capability would interact as they scale up. So yeah, it's great to know that it's part of the Developer Fast Track program. I believe also because we're trying to pair the Developer Fast Track program with Contentstack Academy, that there'll also be learnings and capabilities within the Academy as well for people to really learn the features and learn how best to kind of impart them kind of within their own implementation.
Correct. Yeah. With Academy, we'll definitely kind of showcase best practices with building out taxonomies and content types and teams within our platform. You'll be able to kind of side by side with some of these starter apps as well, of seeing how we actually implemented it in our side. And then with our Academy, you'll be able to see step by step of how to implement it for your own stacks.
Very, very cool. All right. So yeah, we'll make sure to keep an eye on those features as they roll out in both Academy and in the Developer Fast Track. So yeah, again, Michelle, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. You were our first to return onto the program, so setting the bar appropriately, and we'll make sure to have you back. There's a lot of good stuff happening here, and I know elsewhere, which we'd love to have you come back and share with everyone. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely an honor to come back, and really excited to share so many things that we're working on. Very exciting things for customers as well.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, and for our audience out there, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you again real soon.
Be sure to check out the show notes for relevant links and content. To learn even more about the power of going composable, head to contentstack.com.